because they're my three favourite topics of conversation. So, but like Janet, I need to take us back to May 2019 and that amazing television series, that BBC HBO Gentleman Jack, which absolutely blew me away. I think that's what you said, didn't you, Janet? Absolutely incredible. I had actually already visited Shibden Hall before that series came out, and I was already aware of the relationship between Anne Lister and Anne Walker, but I hadn't really felt sort of engaged with the story. And then the TV show came out, and it was so brilliantly acted and so brilliantly written. It just brought them to life for me, and that was a sort of a real light bulb moment. I was just thrilled to bits with it. I joined a Gentleman Jack Facebook group, and I must have been a bit late joining, because when I joined there was 10,000 members. I mean, that was incredible, absolutely incredible. And now what I found on that Facebook group was that West Yorkshire Archive Service were looking for people to transcribe the diaries, because as we all know, the diaries are very difficult to read. And I thought, oh, I fancy having a go at that. So I applied, and they sent me a couple of pages of Anne Lister's diaries. There we are. And I had a go at transcribing them. I sent them back. They were happy with what I did, and so they signed me up as one of the code breakers, as they call us. And then I got stuck into transcribing, and it was incredible. It was quite literally like I was transported back to the early 19th century. It was like going down the time tunnel. That shows my age a bit, but it was just like I was back in Georgian England. I was with Anne Lister, and she was talking to me, and that's how it felt every minute that I sat down to transcribe the diaries. And it was just thrilling. And what I then wanted to do, this is sort of autumn winter of that year, May 2019. I wanted to go to places where she'd been. So obviously I went back to Shibden. So this was now my third visit to Shibden. And then my wife and I went to Halifax Minster. We went to Lightcliffe. And then at Christmas we went to York, because we wanted to see Holy Trinity Church, which actually moved me to tears with emotion. And I can tell you, that doesn't happen very often. And we went to Petergate to see where the Belcombs and the Norcliffes have lived, and we went and looked for the Manor School, which we found. It amazes me how many of these buildings are still standing. The Manor School that Anne Lister went to when she was about 14. So, and then carrying on with the transcribing, and transcribing from lots of different years, you know, throughout her whole life. Because I didn't ask for any particular years to be sent to me. I just did what came, basically. So I've been transcribing from lots of different years, and the result of that is I felt like I was really getting to understand the woman, and really felt like I was connecting with her. And then I think it was one morning in April 2020. We had been in lockdown for a few weeks, and I just woke up one morning, and just as I was waking up, the idea to write a book about Anne Lister popped into my head. And a second later, the title popped into my head, and that was Anne Lister, Anne Walker and Me. And that took me back a bit. I thought, where did that and me bit come from? And then I just thought about it, and I thought, well, everything that had happened in the previous 12 months, and with the transcribing the show, the making visits here, there and everywhere, it was obvious why it was and me, as well as the idea of writing a book. But at that moment, it came as a bit of a surprise, although I have found I usually have my best ideas just as I wake up, or when I'm in the garden anyway. So I then got to work straight away. I called it, I say to work, but it was an absolute labour of love. It wasn't, I didn't find it difficult. I didn't have to force myself to sit down to write. It was just an absolute joy. And took me about 10 months to actually write the first draft, and then lots more months after that to sort of perfect it. So then, sort of to answer the question, how did I approach actually writing it, the actual nitty-gritty of writing it? Well, I wanted the book to have energy. I wanted it to be optimistic. I wanted it to be entertaining. I wanted it to be uplifting, because those are the words I'd use to describe Anne Lister. I wanted it to be accurate. I wanted what I wrote about Anne Lister and Anne Walker's relationship to be correct and true and accurate. And that would mean a lot more transcribing for me. But what I also found was that all the transcribing I'd done, I could actually skim read a page of her diary and zip through a page very quickly to see whether it had something in it I might want to put in the book. And so oh yes, that's the other thing. As Janet mentioned, I've only written physics books up to this point, and this is, and it's usually the end of any conversation if I even mention that I've written physics books. And you would probably think that's not a very good preparation for writing a historical biography, right? But in actual fact, it turned out to be okay, because when I'm writing a physics book, I'm explaining to the reader, like as if I'm just writing to one person, I'm explaining to the reader why something happens. So that's how I decided to approach this Anne Lister, Anne Walker and me. I'll describe to the reader what's going on, but then I'd try and explain why it was going on. And I figured that I could do that because I could go back to different bits of the diaries that I've transcribed to find an explanation for something that was happening further on. And I'm wondering if it's okay if I can just read the actual chapters, what I actually included in the book, a bit about Anne and Anne's lives before they got together. I've done a chapter on Anne Lister's oddity. Now that's Anne Lister's word, not mine. It's basically for her lesbian nature. The way she walked, her mannerisms, the way she dressed, and her love of sex as well. So I wonder if I can give a couple of quotes from the book on Anne Lister's oddity. Is that okay? Right. So, on November 25th, 1819, Anne Lister, aged 28, was writing about a conversation she had had with her friend Elizabeth Brown. This led to the subject of my oddity. I owned I was, very. She would never meet another. Such peculiar feelings, peculiar circumstances made me what I was. She said I was very agreeable. Everybody, even those who had only seen me for 5 minutes, all owned this. She liked my oddity. I said I was aware of that. I knew all the ladies did like it. It was my oddity that made me so agreeable. So I've got that quote. There's another quote I really must add, because, of course, as Angela was mentioning, sex was very important to Anne Lister. So, Anne Lister longed for female company. So, of course, there were to be other women in her life to make up for the long separations from Mariana. She frequently stayed at Langton Hall, the home of the Nautilus just outside York. On one such occasion, she had an extended winter stay from October 5th, 1820, till January 8th, 1821. During her stay, she enjoyed the company of her dear friend Isabella and her younger sister Charlotte, their friend Mary Valance, Anne Belcombe, and her married sister Harriet Milne. Well, there was flirting with Harriet and kissing with Charlotte, but with Tib, Anne Belcombe and Mary, things went further. Just a few of the many journal entries. December 13th, Anne Lister, quote, "Good kiss off Tib last night." December 21st, Anne Lister, quote, "With Anne alone in her room, dawdling and lovemaking till 3. Then went to Mary Valance. took her on my knee, held her with my right arm, and grubbled with the second finger of the left. I kept it nearly still, and she gave the action, so that I'm sure she felt enough. We were a goodish while at it, and had only just done when Charlotte came in. So, a few things about Anne Lister's lesbian nature, and then there's chapters on courtship, the separation, them being reunited, their commitment to each other on February 10th, 1834, and then the taking of the sacrament in York in March 30th, 1834. Another chapter for 2 weeks spell that Anne Walker spent at Shibden. Not everybody is aware, but the reason why, as I'm sure you guys know, Anne Lister and Anne Walker took the sacrament in York was because Anne Walker was in lodgings at the time under the care of Dr. Belcombe to get treatment for her anxiety. And during the time she was in lodgings, she did go and stay at Shibden for a 2-week stay, and they also had a little trip to Richmond in North Yorkshire for a birthday treat. And that's going to be my last excerpt. Am I okay? Have I still got time to just go to the last one? Okay. Okie dokie. So this is when they're on their way to Richmond. Anyway, they passed through the village of Leeming at about 5 o'clock. Then as they travelled, ate a dinner of bone shoulder, veal, ham and oranges they brought with them. Anne Lister, quote, grubbling as we came along in the carriage just before and after Borough Bridge. They arrived at the King's Head Hotel in Richmond and had tea. Anne Lister described their accommodation as very comfortable, large, excellent sitting room and bedroom adjoining. The King's Head still stands and has been providing hospitality for 300 years. In 1834, it was the hotel of choice for the nobility and gentry. I have not visited the King's Head, but it is certainly on my list. Anyway, we're booked in for my birthday meal in January at the King's Head. So that's another place where I can go where Anne Lister has been. Anyway, the last couple of chapters are, the honeymoon, the trips around France, writing about them, travelling around France and Switzerland were absolutely wonderful. I loved writing that. Then they set up home at Shibden, which is an absolute fascination. Everything that they did and the changes and the bits they stuck here and there at Shibden was wonderful. And my book ends on, it takes in Christmas 1834 and it finishes on New Year's Eve 1834. And what next? Well, I'm going to carry on visiting places because that is an absolute fascination. I mean, my wife and I visited Skelfler House, Cliff Hill, Hoare End House and Langton Hall just this summer. And, but, you know, I'm thinking maybe my passion for Anne Lister is as great as ever. And so maybe there will be another book. We'll see.